The nation's oldest traveling celebration of the arts, the National Folk Festival, is coming to downtown Jackson November 7th through the 9th. Discover the sights, sounds, and flavors of our nation. The full lineup is now available, featuring blues, gospel, Puerto Rican, Irish, Southern Soul, Bluegrass, Korean, Zydeco, Flamenco, HBCU marching bands, Choctaw, Go-Go, and more. It's unique and unforgettable fun for the entire family, and it's free. More at nationalfolkfestival.com.
Mississippi is a place of deep roots where every story matters and every voice can be heard. At MPB, we stand with our local communities, bringing you the voices of those who shape our state through local programming that reflects our culture across small towns to big cities, from the Delta to the coast. We tell the stories that define us, from the music that carries our voices to the leaders who inspire change. MPB brings you the heart of Mississippi, celebrating Mississippi one story at a time. MPB, your stories, our mission.
What's happening, Mississippi? On Wednesday, October 15th, you have found the Sit Down with Russ Latino right here on MPB Think Radio, where we explore the ideas and people that are shaping Mississippi's future. Good program for you today, a somber program for you today, in part coming off of a weekend with some real violence that occurred across Mississippi at a number of football games, first on Friday night in Heidelberg and Leland and in Rolling Fork. And then on Saturday at the Jackson State game and the Alcorn State game. We'll talk with Commissioner of Public Safety Sean Tindell about the state's response, what we know at this point, what we know about motivations. The FBI has gotten involved in that case as well, particularly the case in Leland. So we'll visit with Commissioner Tindell in a bit here to talk a little bit about the state's reaction, what the state's doing, what we know. And so stay tuned for that. I will tell you, obviously, that's a tragedy. Anytime you have loss of life, that's a tragedy. You have people who go to a football game expecting to have a good time, right? Root for their team. Sometimes that ends in the agony of defeat. Sometimes it ends in celebration. But you certainly don't expect it to end with the loss of life and gunfire. And so we'll visit with Commissioner Tindell a bit about that. Germaine, when I came in today, outside in the MPB studio, there's quite the setup.
We love it. It's Becoming Thurgood, and it's the documentary coming out of Maryland Public Television that we've acquired here to be able to screen it at Mississippi Public Broadcasting.
So y'all are screening that?
Yes, we will be screening that this afternoon, but everybody, I think maybe we'll be able to go out there and view that a little bit later on, maybe in the year.
So it will eventually be available to everybody
on TV,
via Mississippi
possibly.
Public Broadcasting.
Yep, streaming, possibly, yes. So we're excited.
And, that's a remarkable life. I've alluded to this on the radio before, but obviously I practiced law for a long time. He is one of those figures in sort of the training of the practice of law that is venerated really across the spectrum for what he was able to accomplish. Yeah. It makes sense that it's based out of Maryland because he was born in Maryland, attended Howard University, became an incredible civil rights lawyer. I mean, for a number of decades worked with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And I think, as I recall, he was the lead appellate attorney on Brown v. Board of Education, which famously is the case, I think in 1954, that overturned Plessy v. Ferguson, eliminated segregation, at least legally eliminated segregation. Yeah. Obviously, there were places, including Mississippi, where it took longer for that to take root, but legally ended separate but equal. And then was appointed by Kennedy, I think, to the Court of Appeals in the early 60s.
You know it all. I'm always wondering about lawyers. I asked Kamel King Friday on the show, did he know? And he said, yeah, y'all really do study each other.
Yeah. Well, I mean, certain people, right? I mean, there's certain people. It's a bit like being a historian around the legal profession. But was then appointed by Johnson in 67 and ran through 1991 when Clarence Thomas was appointed to take Thurgood Marshall's place. So very cool that you guys are doing that. I think that would be a fascinating program for lawyers and non-lawyers to watch. And I'm glad that you'll eventually get it
Yeah, we're excited.
On big broadcast.
Yes.
You guys have been doing a number of really big things, right? You had the Medgar Evers documentary come out.
Yes, that came out right on the same year his 100th birthday would have been. So we've done that. We've got National Folk Festival on the horizon. I mean, originals just coming out of radio and TV. It's been wild.
Is Taiwo tired?
No, I think Taiwo uses this as energy. This is like his spinach. The more things we have going on, the more Taiwo just amps up.
So you're saying that he is MPB's Popeye?
Yes.
I get it. Hey, we all feed off of different things, right?
Yeah. He's the MPB's Popeye.
Sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative.
That's
For him,
right.
it's positive.
That's right.
He's doing a lot of good work. The whole team is doing a lot of good work. You know, we talked last week, and I just wanted to bring this up because it was a subject of conversation last week on the program. Jeremy England was on, the state senator from down on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and he had just made a trip to Israel in the last few weeks and had written about it pretty extensively. It was interesting watching the response to him. I got some response from this program, but also the response that I saw on social media to him, because it showed a schism of sorts between people who are very supportive of Israel and people who maybe aren't, or even some people who are supportive of Israel but not necessarily the political powers that be there.
Right.
And so it was interesting watching all of that, but obviously that preceded the announcement about the peace deal.
Of course.
And so in some ways was a topical conversation that we didn't know was a topical conversation.
You're hitting nails on the head. You don't even know you're doing it, Russ.
without realizing it. Because then there was the announcement of this peace deal between Israel and Gaza, and really Hamas and Gaza. But, you know, I have been critical of the president at times. On this program, I've been critical of the president at times around tariffs and various things. But I've also always operated with the mindset that, like, you should be willing to acknowledge when good things are happening. And simultaneously, you shouldn't be afraid to point out when you think bad things are happening, regardless of whether it's somebody in your political tribe or somebody else's political tribe. So let me say this. I think it's incredible, assuming that it can stick. It's incredible that Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the president were able to negotiate something that really looked like there wasn't going to be a near-term solution to. And you see already, I think, 20 hostages were released back to Israel, which is obviously good for those families. Pretty incredible to see some of the photographs coming out of that and some of the stories coming out of that of people who were just incredibly emaciated, right? One guy had lost 40% of his body weight while he was in captivity. So obviously was a very painful and traumatic experience. But you'd rather have what's happening now be the end than the alternative, right? And so families being reunited is a really good thing. I think there's still some consternation based on stories that I've read that said that I think there were only 28 remaining dead hostages in Gaza that had not been sent back to Israel yet. I think 4 of them were sent back along with the 20 surviving hostages. And I think there are some families that are really sort of indignant at the idea that the other 24, the remains of the other 24 dead hostages haven't been sent back yet. So that could be a pain point. On the flip side, Israel released, I think it was like 120 detainees or people that were held in prison that were from Gaza. And so that exchange has occurred. There's already been some conversation about potential violations of the ceasefire. Both Israel and Hamas have accused each other of some of those violations. And the response of Israel to the remains not being all sent back was to cut in half the number of humanitarian aid trucks that are allowed back in. So this is not a resolved situation. It is a continuing to evolve situation. But at least by the terms that were agreed upon and signed, both by Israel and Hamas leaders in Gaza, it seems like there's a path to peace, which I know for both sets of people is a good thing, right? I mean, the destruction, the loss of life would end. Obviously, over 1,200 Israelis were killed on October 7th, 2+ years ago. And those attacks, mostly civilians, a lot of young people at that musical festival, and then 67,000 is the estimate of Palestinians that have been killed in Gaza. So tremendous loss of life. And you go just pray for both sets of folks. If I were to assign blame, I would look at Hamas more than I looked at Israel because they initiated the conflict. But at some level, there are a lot of those people who died in Gaza that were completely innocent, right? And just happened to be in a place that was run by Hamas. And so, your heart goes out to all those folks, and you really hope that the end result of this is a lasting and permanent peace for everybody involved.
I agree with that. I mean, it's been a back and forth. And after the episode that we had with him, I did get some feedback from my people here too because Germaine is not always well versed in what's happening. And so I had to be kind of taught of what this side looks like and what that side looks like. But when I learned, I noticed that, there was a little bit of rift in what was, I guess, said on that episode. But that's what we're here for.
Yeah, look, first of all, it's an opinion show, right?
Yeah, that's what we're here for.
And my hope is that there are people who disagree, and hopefully, candidly, to have conversations with some of those people over time. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I agreed with every single thing the senator said, but he has a perspective that I think is valuable from his place of leadership and also from experience having just been there. And candidly, I have a perspective, but it's somewhat rooted in my faith. Mm-hmm. It's somewhat rooted in a knowledge of the history of the place, which is incredibly complex. Mm. And I think people try to simplify it into one side versus the other. And it's that strip of land has been controlled by different people over thousands of years.
Yeah.
And they've been fighting over it for thousands of years. And at some level, the solution that was reached in 1947 after the Holocaust, which was to give Israel its own state at that location, which it had a historical tie to that was thousands of years old, created a new sort of artificial rift in that it introduced essentially a new nation state into a place where it hadn't been before. The flip side of that is the Palestinian claim to that land is also somewhat specious in the sense that, really Palestinians come from Jordan. Even the Jordanians didn't necessarily want the Palestinians in their country. So that's a people group that has been somewhat nomadic. And even the label is somewhat questionable because the phrase Palestine really came from the Roman Empire in the first century. And so there's all sorts of crazy history tied up in this.
That goes into it.
That if, you could be very learned and still have competing views over which side is right and which side is wrong. I think where most people should be able to agree is that the best result is for people not to be killing each other.
I agree.
And if we can get to a place where disagreements are handled diplomatically instead of at the end of a gun, we're in a much better situation as a country and as a globe.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. And this past weekend definitely gave us the example of why we need to put those down.
Yeah, and just raises all sorts of questions, and maybe Commissioner Tindell will be able to address some of this when he comes on with us. It just raises all sorts of questions about what the solution to this is. Mm-hmm. I think part of it is, first of all, identifying what are the causes of something like this. Mm-hmm. But to me, at least, and this is Russ expressing his opinion, it seems like we've gotten to the point that we almost celebrate anger or we justify anger. And I want to be very clear because I got some comments on a post that I made that were racially tinged. I don't think this is like a black problem. I don't think this is a white problem. I think this is like a people problem. And at some level, I think about road rage instances, right? Where people just fly off the handle. We had a situation at the Ole Miss game, which is why I'm red.
You were sunning.
I was sunning, and I'm pale, so it turned me red. But we had a situation at the Ole Miss game over the weekend where we were leaving the stadium out of an Ole Miss parking lot, and it was 2 lanes of traffic trying to turn out. Mm-hmm. It's hard for me to describe, but 2 lanes of traffic trying to turn out, and I was kind of on the left lane turning out. So I turned out, and then I let one guy who had been next to me turn out in front of me.
Okay.
Well, the guy that was behind him really thought he also should get to turn out in front of me. And so, we had kind of eased up. and he just guns it towards my vehicle. It's my wife and my kids in my vehicle. He guns it towards my vehicle and stops within an inch of my door.
Really?
And then once he finally gets out behind me, I mean, it's a line of traffic that is not moving.
Yeah.
You know, it's a 15 to 20 minute wait in a line of traffic.
Yeah, we were literally not going to go anywhere.
That is not moving.
Right.
So him being one car in front of me was not going to affect anything.
Yeah.
But for that full 15 to 20 minutes, I'm looking back, and the guy is just losing his mind.
Crazy.
Yelling at me. And I just had the thought, I was like, we and I'm guilty of this at times, so I don't want to act like I'm above it, but like, we have gotten to the point that we just rationalize or normalize like ridiculous anger.
Yeah. The problem that I have with us being outwardly angry is I think we have a tendency to do it and we don't know what that other person is capable of. You in the car with your wife and children, I don't know what you're capable of, but I'm going to act a fool back here without knowing. And I think those things are the things that stop us. So the fear of the unknowing has now been thrown out the window. And even if, let's just say, that person was not prepared to confront you and you were prepared, well, you never know.
Well, look, I certainly don't want to act like a big tough guy.
No, I mean, but you would have protected.
I would have protected my family.
I know.
And so I just share that as an anecdote to say that it seems like we are increasingly... we don't have personal restraint.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
And that's a real problem. And it's particularly a problem if you're also not all that scared of dying.
Yeah.
And I think some people don't really care if they live or die, or they don't think about it.
Lack of fear is now the new norm.
So you pull out a gun and start shooting at somebody, there's a chance they also have a gun.
Yes, correct.
So, yeah, I mean, at some level, you're making a decision in that moment that it's okay if I die in this exchange.
Got to, because...
Over what? Over a football game?
Over 5 inches.
Or 5
inches? It was 5
inches?
inches. That was 5 inches. He was ready to fight you and the family over 5 inches. But here's the problem. He would have done it in that moment and then had so much more remorse.
Of course.
After he did it, because he would have thought, well... it was 5 inches.
And look, we've all gotten to that moment where we're angry and we're like just a ball of rage.
I know.
And then 10 minutes later, you're like, man, that was stupid.
Yes.
Whoa.
Blood pressure's up now.
Why did I care so much about this insignificant thing?
Blood pressure's up now.
So we'll talk with Sean Tindell about what happened on Friday and Saturday.
Yeah.
He'll be joining us right after the break. Thanks for listening to the Sit Down with Russ Latino. We will be back in just a moment.
This October, the Mississippi Antique Showcase comes to Oxford, where storied relics, family heirlooms, and unique treasures await. But this season, the journey goes beyond the appraisals. Join us for candid conversations with our appraisers, take a peek backstage, and experience the unique charm of Oxford. New episodes air Thursdays at 7 p.m. on MPB Television. MPB, your stories, our mission.
Hello, I'm Desiree Frazier, host of the award-winning news program, Mississippi Edition. We bring you conversations about the latest news from across the Magnolia State. Whether it's politics, healthcare, or education, you'll hear in-depth discussions on issues that matter to you. So join us each weekday morning at 8:30 on MPB Think Radio, or download the podcast, listen through the app, and online.
Everlasting, the Legacy Podcast, is a brand new companion podcast to the MPB documentary Everlasting, the life and legacy of Medgar Evers. Join me, Rita Brent, as we dive deeper into the story with exclusive interviews and conversations about the enduring legacy of Medgar Evers. Everlasting, the Legacy Podcast, available on the MPB app or wherever you get your podcasts, with new episodes every other week. MPB, your stories, our mission.
You're listening to The Sit Down right here on MPB Think Radio. I'm your host, Russ Latino. Joining us in studio now, Commissioner of Public Safety, Sean Tindell. Now, you have been a state senator. You served on the Mississippi Court of Appeals.
Yes, sir.
Now you're the Commissioner of Public Safety. Are you like Mississippi's Forrest Gump with a higher IQ? I mean, you've done a lot of things, is my point.
I've got a lot of comparisons. Forrest Gump has never been one, so thank
I said
you
with a higher IQ.
Some days, depends on who you ask, right? No, it's I've worn a lot of different hats, and it started back when I was in law school. My dad, who was a disabled veteran, passed away, and I moved back home thinking I was going to be a business lawyer. I thought I was going to do an internship with some business law firms on the coast or in Jackson, and all those opportunities were gone because I went home at the last minute, interned at the DA's office down there with long-term DA Kono Karana, and found a passion for public service and being a prosecutor. So when I got out of law school, I went back home and joined the DA's office as soon as I could. I spent 5 years doing that, 3 years as city prosecutor in Biloxi. And when the opportunity came to run for state senate, I thought that would be a great opportunity to serve, and it's just led to these other things. And it's truly just a passion for public service more than anything else.
So in your current role, I know you guys, and in the second half of the show, I want to talk a little bit more about what you've been able to accomplish in the role, because there are some real positive things that have happened. But I know what makes it hard are things like what happened over the weekend. And obviously the shootings at Heidelberg and Leland and Rolling Fork at the South Delta football game there, and then what happened at Jackson State and Alcorn. When those things occur, what is your office's role?
It depends, is the best way I can say it. And some of it depends on where these type of events occur and what resources they have. If something happens in DeSoto County, they have 900 local law enforcement officers in DeSoto County. They can handle a lot more of the burden than maybe some of the smaller counties or the smaller cities. So some of it depends on where these events occur. And if it occurs in one of our smaller counties, one of our smaller cities, we play a much more active role in the response. If it's in one of our larger communities, we're there to support. I can tell you Saturday morning I was on the phone with the sheriffs in Washington County. I was on the phone with the sheriff in Jasper County. And my message to them was, whatever you need, we're a will-do agency. We will do anything to help you. Just reach out to me, reach out to anybody on my staff or any of our leadership, and we're going to make sure that we're responsive to your needs. Because in those moments when you've got an event like this going on and it's drawing, let's say, national media, state media, you've got a lot of pressure, you've got victims. A lot of times you have officers that are also maybe hurt or have been engaged in the shooting. There's a lot of different things going on, and we can offer assets to help in all those arenas, whether it's through our public information offices, whether it's through MBI doing the investigation, whether it's through the highway patrol and just trying to do some crowd control. There's just a lot of different things that we can do on a statewide level to help, and I just want them to know that's our message to them is, what do you need?
What is the status in each one of those three cases from Friday night? I mean, obviously in Leland we saw, 6 deaths?
Leland, I think there was 18 injuries, 6 deaths. And then, of course, over in Heidelberg, you had a couple. There's been arrest in Heidelberg. In Leland, there's been arrest. Leland, because of the mass size of it and the some of the what we were dealing with as far as the totality of the numbers, the FBI got heavily involved. And in fact, I was on the phone today with one of their agents trying to talk through the investigations, where we were, what they needed, and Agent Eichhoff said it. He said, thank you for NBI. The collaborative efforts with NBI and Highway Patrol and the Department of Public Safety has been very beneficial to even them leading the investigation and trying to apprehend the individuals that they have. And really, if you go back to when we started this as Commissioner of Public Safety, I think our second year in, we got with the Attorney General's office and we started doing our Public Safety Summit, where we called in leaders in law enforcement from across the state, chiefs, sheriffs, state law enforcement, and federal law enforcement. So we were making these connections over the last 2 or 3 years so that when an event like this occurs, they're on the phone with me, I'm on the phone with them, we have personal relationships, and we can better facilitate those responses.
And I'm just kind of curious, obviously I think Kash Patel even put out some statements, who's the director of the FBI. When they decide to get involved in something like the shooting in Leland, what are the criteria that they operate off of, if you know, and then what does that involvement actually look like?
Well, I can tell you when it comes to the Delta, and I've met with some folks with the DOJ and U.S. Attorney's Office about trying to do some more coordinated efforts on addressing crime in that area, because sometimes it's really hard to secure a conviction in some of these jurisdictions through the courts in state court. So the feds have been very open to us trying to bring federal charges on many of these crimes so that we can secure those convictions. So those relationships had already been there. And what typically will happen is we get a call that basically just says we need some help. Or in this case, we reach out to the FBI and say, we need your resources, some of your intelligence gathering capabilities that we might not have on the state level. And can you bring it in and try to collectively bring everybody together and lead the operation?
So in that situation, they end up literally leading, right? They're not just playing a support role.
Oh, yeah. And so when they step in, they're, sometimes there'll be support, but in a situation like this, they really stepped in and try to take the lead. And again, with the assets that they have and the resources, and look, with Kash Patel coming out saying they're going to be held accountable, with the governor coming out saying, hey, the FBI is here and we're going to hold those accountable, that really brings all hands on deck and to send that message that we're not going to tolerate this type of behavior. So
4 arrests in Leland. I saw that I think 3 of them were charged with capital murder. 1, though, was charged with attempted murder. Are you guys confident at this point, or the FBI confident at this point, that everybody that was involved in the shooting has been apprehended, or are there more suspects out there?
I think there will be more suspects. And I can't go into too many details about it, but I think the way that this is being approached is it's not just the people that were there pulling triggers. If you assisted in any way trying to hide or destroy evidence or not cooperate with law enforcement, you're going to be getting the heavy hand of the law coming at you. And we're trying to send a message here. The days of this types of lawlessness need to come to a stop. And we saw it in the city of Jackson when Capitol Police broadened its scope. There was a lot of pushback. What I noticed is a lot of that pushback wasn't coming from the people that lived in the city of Jackson. It was coming from agitators coming from outside saying, oh, they're just trying to take over the city. They're trying to do this. They're trying to hurt the people of the city. And then when you talk to the people that actually live here, they're like, we want to sit in our front yard and watch our kids play. Yeah. And so I think Governor Reeves' message and Director Patel's message is, we're not going to tolerate this in D.C. We're not going to tolerate it in Memphis. And you know what? We're not going to tolerate it in Leland, Mississippi. Yeah. We're going to put a stop to this.
Do you have any sense of what the fight was about, how it broke out?
No, I will say that some of the people that were injured were also some of the agitators. And so in between there, you had a lot of innocent victims caught up in crossfire. And a lot of these things start with street-level gangs, which are much different than the gangs that we think of from the 90s, my generation, where you had the Crips and the Bloods. I mean, these gangs are more street-level, and they're smaller, and they operate in a much different manner. So there's a lot of, you've hurt my ego, you've discredited me, you've dissed me, whatever the term may be, and the retaliation in those types of street-level gangs is often swift and very severe. And again, it's one of those messages that we're going to send. It's not going to be tolerated once law enforcement gets involved. There's going to be arrest and there's going to be repercussions. But I've said this on numerous occasions. This isn't a thing that we're just going to be able to take law enforcement and get ourselves out of. Law enforcement is a response. It's reactive. We need to take a deep look at our child protection services, and Andrea Sanders has been doing a great job there, but we've got to start getting to some of these young people earlier and getting them out of these homes where this type of behavior is tolerated and allowed to exist. And we've got to get, I think, and I've been doing 82 counties across the state, one of the number one issues I hear is juvenile crime. And what are we going to do with these 14 or 15-year-olds that are going down this path? They learn early on there's really no consequences for their actions. And so as they mature into older teenagers and young 20s, that's how they live their life. And so we got to address this a little bit sooner than wait until they're 19 or 20.
Yeah, and certainly sooner than waiting until there are these kinds of violent events, right? There's a lot of stuff that leads up in the development of a human being to the point that you think the way that I solve this is by pulling out a gun and shooting at somebody.
That's absolutely.
It doesn't happen on that night, right? It's character development that leads up to that point. And yeah, the intervention clearly has to be earlier than when you're involved in figuring out who did what.
That's right.
At this point, if you look at the 3 shootings on Friday night, the 2 that happened on Saturday at the Alcorn State and Jackson State game, have there been people arrested in each one of those incidents, or are there still people that you guys are trying to figure out who the suspect is?
There are, and of course we had 5 different incidences between Friday night and Saturday. Of course, you had Alcorn and Jackson State. You had the incident in Sharkin County, Leland, and Heidelberg. And so there's been arrest in some of those, and in some of the other ones, the investigations are still ongoing. And MBI has tried to work with all those different partners in those different cases to try to secure arrest. And so we're getting there. I'm confident that we will have arrest in all those cases. And I'll tell you, something that frustrates me, and to kind of harp on something else, a few weeks ago in Cleveland, we had a young man who, unfortunately, I believe, committed suicide. And the narrative quickly turned to this individual was murdered, he was hung, he was lynched, if you want to use that term. And you know what? When those types of things happen, it takes away from the conversations we need to be having about the homicides that we have in Mississippi. And when I've had some of the stats pulled from the medical examiner's office, it was eye-opening to see that, over the last 4 years, we've had in Mississippi a total of, I think, 2,172 suicides. We've had 2,764 homicides. 78% of the suicides were committed by Caucasians, 17.5% by African Americans. But when you go to the homicides, those numbers almost reverse. And there have been about 78%, 2,171 African Americans that have died in homicides, and 517 Caucasians. And so all that's blowing up in Cleveland, Mississippi, and there's this narrative going around and false information that it was a lynching, and that term is overly used, and it's not accurate. We haven't had a documented lynching in Mississippi since I think the 40s or 50s, and so it's been a long, long time. But it takes away from the important narrative that we need to be having about safe neighborhoods and mental health. Those are 2 both very important issues, and when we look at the suicide numbers as well as the homicide numbers, and those types of terms and racial rhetoric are thrown around, it takes the focus away from where it needs to be. Why are so many more African Americans falling victim to homicides?
Yeah, and that's a weighty topic, obviously, and one that invites a lot of emotion. I think I had the same reaction to the situation in Cleveland that you had. When I looked at that situation, I thought, man, here are people who are just wildly speculating. And when you look at Mississippi's history, they're wildly speculating in a way that is likely to inflame other people, right? And play on the worst of our past, instead of taking this as an opportunity to say, we've got mental health problems in our state and our country, and those things are solvable, but not if you create this distraction on the other side that, candidly, to this day, I see people posting about that situation in Cleveland, and there are people who still believe, even though there's video footage, still believe that this young man was killed by someone else. That doesn't help anybody because we don't have the real conversation.
That's right. And when in news outlets like the Washington Post, and this was just a couple of years ago, runs a national article saying that lynchings still occur in Mississippi, it 100% diverts the attention that needs to be given to mental health, that needs to be given to safe neighborhoods, and puts it on something that just doesn't exist. And so, and look, social media has a lot of great things about it. It's a way to connect people. It's a way to share information. But the misinformation that can be put out there on social media, quite frankly, is disgusting. And, you know, I'm a firm believer in free speech, just like I am the Second Amendment, but both those things require responsibility. You can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater. There needs to be some responsibility for what information you put out and inflaming the public mind, just like you would a crowded movie theater by yelling fire.
Yeah, that's another hefty topic that I think everybody's kind of grappling with as you see AI and the proliferation of AI, where there are just articles that are clearly false. I mean, they are in fact engaged in what, you know, we would say in my industry is libel, but there's no mechanism to regulate it, and you see there are thousands and tens of thousands of people in some cases engage in that as if it is true, or engage with it as if it is true. So it is hard to combat misinformation at this point. We got to take a brief break. We'll be back with Commissioner Sean Tindell right afterwards. Stay tuned to the Sit Down.
The Measuring Show.
Since 1970, MPB has been enriching the lives of Mississippians.
Everything we do gives us the chance to grow and learn.
With your support, we are always there whenever and wherever you need us. Together through the years, together in the future. Please consider making a donation at mpbfoundation.org. MPB, your stories, our mission.
At the Mississippi Arts and Entertainment Experience in Meridian, we believe in the power of the arts, storytelling, and education, just like Mississippi Public Broadcasting. MPB connects communities across the state with quality programs that inform, inspire, and engage. Their audience is loyal and appreciative of businesses that support public broadcasting, which makes underwriting on MPB a smart investment. Join us in supporting MPB. Learn more at mpbfoundation.org.
Hatred destroys the one who hates. The others that you have hated, go on about their business. Care of us.
So the legacy of Medgar Evers is an understanding of our own humanity and of our own responsibility of seeing that in other people.
He is written out of history. He's just not included as Malcolm and Martin. To me, it's the 3 M's, and Medgar is right up there at the lead.
Everlasting, Life and Legacy of Medgar Evers. Watch now on MPB Passport. Visit mpbonline.org for more.
You're listening to Sit Down right here on MPB Think Radio, talking today with Commissioner Sean Tindell, Commissioner of Public Safety. We've been talking a little bit about the situations that unfolded over the weekend in Leland and Heidelberg and Rolling Fork, and then obviously at Alcorn State and Jackson State. It was a tragic weekend with 10 deaths, if you include the death of an unborn child, a pregnant woman who was killed in Heidelberg. Obviously, hearts go out to all of those families, but I think, you know, at some point you also have to have the perspective that it needs to be more than, hey, my heart goes out to you. We need to start having serious conversations about the root cause of this kind of activity and what can be done societally to address it. We're never going to live in a perfect society. There's always going to be crime. And if you look at the stats overall, crime has been going down considerably for a long time. That's obviously a positive thing, but these sorts of incidents remind people of the potential of violence and the potential of this kind of tragedy. And obviously people want answers. Appreciate all the work that you guys are doing, all the work that local law enforcement has done, and obviously the FBI also got involved in Leland. We were talking off air a little bit, and I think it's an important conversation about the way that our mentality towards mental health and youth crime changed in the last 20 to 30 years and some of the negative effect of that. And I was curious if maybe you couldn't share your perspective on that again, because I thought what you shared off air was important.
Well, I think when we talk about mental health, and it's been the notion of the federal government for a while now, and it's been pushed down into our institutions that train our mental health professionals, is that the standard for community-based rehabilitation for those with mental health issues, while laudable, creates a host of issues, because the standard is once they show that they can get stable, then they're released back into the community. And really the standard ought to be, can they maintain that stability? And if they can do it on their own, then of course they need to be put back into the community, and community-based rehabilitation is great. The problem is when they can't maintain that stability, and then they usually end up being homeless or living in one of their aunt's trailers in the back with a window unit, and until some point comes along where the relative gets scared of them, they have a gun, they call law enforcement, and either they kill themselves or they get in a shootout with law enforcement in which they die or a law enforcement officer gets hurt. And so really the standard there ought to be, can they maintain that stability? And that would solve, I think, a lot of issues that we see with the homelessness and other things. And I will say the Department of Mental Health and Department of Health have done a great job on more mental health awareness in Mississippi. There's been some changes in the law that have helped our jails not become holding facilities for those with mental health issues. And then on the other side of the equation, you have the juvenile delinquency problem, where 20 years ago we had about 450 bed spaces for juvenile delinquents in Mississippi. We're down to about 40. And so that means that most of these juvenile delinquents are coming in and out of local facilities, which generally run less than 90 days on being there, or they're adjudicated as an adult and put into the adult system. And neither one of those solutions is really good. What we really need is a good juvenile delinquent program where we have bed spaces where we can take these juvenile delinquents and put them into long-term facilities and make sure that we're not putting them back out into the schools and they're bringing their criminal element to others, or they learn a system where it's always a catch and release and there's no repercussions for their actions. So we have to get tough on juvenile crime, and I know that's hard. A lot of people look at them like these are 13 or 14-year-olds in their neighborhood, and they're not. I had one DA tell me, if you're going to get robbed, you want to get robbed by a 40-year-old. He wants your money. If you get robbed by a 14-year-old, he just as soon shoots you. And that's the mindset of some of these young individuals. They're not contemplating the future. They're not contemplating their own demise. They're just living in the moment, and they have no adult supervision. It's multi-generational at this point, and until we address juvenile crime in a real heavy way, I think we're going to continue to see more and more of these incidences. And I will say, across the state, homicides are down. Coming out of 2020, I think we had over 600, which was a record number, and we've started seeing a decrease in those numbers, and I think a lot of it's the initiatives have been put towards public safety as well. We've increased the number of MBI agents, we've increased the number of highway patrolmen, local departments have grown. I was just in Cleveland, Mississippi. They have 47 full-time sworn law enforcement officers in a town of about 11,000. Starting salary in Cleveland is $61,000 a year. They haven't had a homicide in 18 months in Cleveland, Mississippi. That is a board, that is a city that has committed itself to public safety and put good qualified law enforcement officers out on the streets.
Obviously, law enforcement matters, right? I think there was this time where, you had some folks running around talking about defunding the police and whatnot. But to your point, if you talk to people in communities of high instances of violence, they certainly didn't want to defund the police.
That's right.
Right. They wanted more policing, not less policing. I think there's also this element of, and you mentioned this, sort of the generational thing. To me, the biggest problem in Mississippi by far is fatherlessness. And I don't just mean for crime, although there's certainly a ton of statistics that show instances of crime in fatherless houses is way higher than those with both a father and mother in the house. But also education attainment, right? The ability to earn long-term, all of these things, mental health, all of them are affected by the absence of fathers in houses. And it's become taboo to mention that because people view it as some sort of criticism on single parents. I don't view it as a criticism on single parents at all. If anything, I look at single parents and say, you're doing more work than you should have to do. And in some cases doing really good jobs. But the result is statistically across the board, the problems that come out of a single parent household are far higher than the problem that comes out of fatherless households. Benjamin Franklin once said that restraint is a virtue, but it's the hardest one to keep. I think that at some level, fathers teach restraint and discipline, and the absence of that creates some real problems.
Absolutely. And now you're talking about 2 or 3 generations with fatherless households. And so you might be able to survive that for a generation or two, but when you start getting into 3 generations of fatherless households and no real grandfather influence and broken homes, you're going to see more and more of these problems as that trend goes on. And and you talked about something. I saw a study out of Alabama. They looked at their 3rd grade reading levels, and that was an indicative of where they were 20 years later on their incarceration rates. And one of the things that would infuriate me when I was at the Court of Appeals is when we would have cases come along and there would be a father who's opposing the termination of his parental rights, hadn't paid child support in 8 years, hasn't seen his kid, but he loves his child. Make no mistake, that's what's always in the transcript. I love my child. I don't want to lose my child. Well, loving that child is the easy part. Valuing that child, raising that child, being a parent is where the rubber meets the road. It's easy for anybody to say you love your child, but what are you doing to raise that child? And it doesn't matter if you're poor, doesn't matter if you're rich. You've got to value your children. I've seen rich people that don't value their children. I've seen poor people that don't. I've seen poor people that value their children. Those kids are going to be successful.
Yeah.
And so you got to value that child. You got to encourage education. You got to teach them work ethic. You got to spend that time with them. When you do, you're going to have successful kids. You're going to have successful people, and you're going to have a successful society. And that's where I think sometimes we get lost in some of these communities is nobody is valuing those children.
Yeah, and if you don't get that kind of reinforcement and that kind of encouragement, then you try to find ways to draw attention, right? And I think you see that in a lot of these instances where it's, again, a learned behavior over time that, one, I don't matter to anybody else, so I don't matter to myself. So if I end up in a gunfight and I end up getting killed, so be it, that kind of attitude. And 2, generally, that the way that I get attention is by being bad.
That's right. Well,
and that builds over time for a kid from a young age on.
And if mom and dad aren't valuing you, or you don't have a grandparent or a family member that's valuing you, and a teacher can only do so much in the time that they have with you each day, you're going to go to who values you. And unfortunately for a lot of these kids, it's people that want to take advantage of them by introducing them to the drug trade at an early age and an atmosphere of violence. And so they're going to fall into the gang culture.
So we've got just a few seconds left. I know you said you're doing an 82-county tour. Tell us a little bit about that.
Very eye-opening. Wanted to go around and meet with sheriffs and chiefs and talk about things that affect public safety in their counties. I've made a habit of going all to the sheriff's conference and all the chiefs' conferences the last 4 or 5 years. Wanted to be able to go in their backyards and hear what was concerning to them. And, big thing is Tier 5, and I get it for first responders. So hopefully those are some conversations we can have about that for first responders. And then also just looking at the juvenile delinquent mental health problems that these communities are facing. And then, one of the things I've said, it's going to be 82 pounds in 82 days because there's no shortage of good food in Mississippi, but there's also no shortage of government. And it's been a little shocking to see that some of these places that just don't have the resources are trying to function as governmental entities. And I think we got to have some really tough conversations about local law enforcement and at what level there should be some consolidations.
Just eat one piece of catfish.
Oh, never.
We've been talking with Commissioner Sean Tindell. Commissioner Tindell, thanks for coming on. The Sit Down is a production of Mississippi Public Broadcasting, Think Radio, made possible thanks to the generous support of listeners like you. If you enjoy the guests and sit-downs we bring each week, please consider making a contribution to help keep shows like this on the air. Visit mpbonline.org or show your support using the MPB Public Media app. Today's show was produced by Germaine Flood, live stream production by Marissa Vaughn. For my guest, Sean Tindell, I'm Russ Latino. Stay tuned for Southern Remedy right here at 11 a.m. and join us next week for a new episode of The Sit Down, heard only on MPB Think Radio.